Hiya, I'm Toy. Welcome back to Educator.com's AJAX jQuery course. Today we're going to talk about selectors. Yeah, well, what is a selector? All right, well, let's talk about that. Say you have on your HTML page, you have a text box, or multiple text boxes, but I don't feel like drawing them all. Would you just draw one? You have a div with a bunch of text, a bunch of copy. You have maybe an image on here. You have a submit button. Okay? A selector is a method by which you can tell jQuery to pick any one of these elements. One or multiple elements, kind of group them together. You can be, if you have a lot of things you want to, if you have a lot of things you want to do on a lot of elements on the page all at once, then you can, if you manipulate your naming conventions properly, or if you pick the right selector, you can get a whole bunch at once, or you could be very specific down to one thing. So for example, if I wanted to pick this image, and every time I hovered over the image with my mouse, I would want it to do a rollover kind of effect. I would use the selector to pick this particular image. And then once I hovered out of it, then I would unrollover affect it. Similarly, I could, if I needed to find out what the value of this text box is, what somebody typed in there, I can use a selector to look up this element here and tell me what's in that box right now. Okay? So the most basic and widely used selectors are the class selector and the ID selector. Now the class selector is denoted by this period here. It's tiny on the screen, but it's really important, okay? And an ID selector is denoted by the pound. All right? So say, if we go back to here, we've got this image, all right? Say that image, say the HTML of the image look like this. Image ID equals image ID, class equals image class, source equals pic.jpg, and then we close that off. Okay. To select this image, we would say $J. If we wanted to select it via the class, which would be this here, we would say $J dot, that dot's super important, image class. If we wanted to select it via ID, we would do $J pound image ID. Now, what's the benefits and give and take of these two? Well, if, for example, you have a bunch of images on your page and they all had the class of image class, or they all had a class of thumbnail, you could select all your thumbnails on the page all at once. Or say you just wanted, if you were doing a rollover effect, and you just wanted to have that rollover effect only on that one image, then you would pick the ID for that image and just say, just use this image. Or I'm going to have this rollover effect. When I roll into it, it lights up. Okay? So let's get started. Let's get started straight away. And let's do something about this. So I've set up some HTML here. And I typed this all in beforehand because I didn't want you to sit there and be bored by my typing. So I set some stuff up here. Let me just explain to you real quickly how I did it. There's a whole bunch of elements I built here for you just to kind of play with, all right? And if we look at this here, you will see that all on this left side is all these elements that I've built. And then on the right side is just these kind of link commands that I've built, so that while we're building all that, so that we can actually, you can see what's going on with how we're playing with it on the left side. All right? So here it is, all of these inputs and ULs and just kind of elements, and then all of these commands that we actually that we're going to build out with jQuery to show you examples of this. So let's start with show me the class selector. All right. Once again, I've gotten this jQuery just kind of ramped up for you. And this first button here is this class. So let's pick that one. The dot. So every time I hit this element here, every time I click, on this element, this class A element, which corresponds to right here, then let's do something like this. We're going to pick out text I, and we're going to, this is a method that you might or might not be familiar with yet, but we'll go into in depth later on in a future class. But just you can just read it. It just adds a class to it. Adds a class to that element. And let's give it something obnoxious right now. Orange border. Now we haven't built the class yet, so it won't do anything, but our thoughts are there. Okay, so text I know that text I, since I built it, is this element here. There's no other place on this page which has a class of text I. But if there were, it would affect all the text I's. All right? So it's going to be the text area. Okay, so let's try it out. Let's hit this. Nothing happened. Why is that? Because there is no class yet defined in our CSS of orange border. So let's go define that. All right, let's say .orange border. Border solid 10 pix orange, just to make it super obnoxious. This is super obvious that it's actually doing something. This is also another eye catcher, so we absolutely do not miss that it's doing something. All right, now let's try it. This should work. All right, show me the class selector. And bang, hits the text area with a giant orange border. Okay. Similarly, let's build out the ID selector, which is that. And that link name is called IDA. So I can pretty much type that. $J dot IDA. So whenever I click on that link, then let's find something like this one here. Has an ID. Our first text box has an ID of text 1I. And let's give that a giant obnoxious border. and you have to refresh it. You have to do a shift refresh because CSS and JavaScript files kind of stay cached in memory. So just to make sure that you are really getting the things that you just edited loading up, do a shift refresh. So show me the class selector. We know that works. Show me the ID selector. Bam! There it goes. Okay. Now there is so let's go back and look at our PowerPoint here. Inputs and type equals. Okay? There's multiple ways, because the inputs are so important, there's multiple ways of selecting inputs in our jQuery. It's really kind of up to you which one you pick. Let's start with this first one. :input. So, here we go. Let's get this input A. So every time I click on this link here, typing kind of is ragged today. Sorry about that. All right, every time we hit on that input link, let's pick our input select. Let's pick all our inputs and add an orange border. All right, let's try that. Oops. Reload. Show me the input selector. Awesome. It picked them all. Notice how it did not put a border around my UL, and that's because a UL is not an input. It's a UL. It looks like it did not put a border around the checkbox or the radio button. It really did. The checkbox and radio button have their own issues with borders and stuff. So, but if we were to actually look at the class, if we were actually to inspect the element, you would see that the class is there. All right. Now, just so I don't have to sit here and refresh the page every single time, let's get this clear button to work. And it's basically the same thing as this line. And I know that I call this the clear button. Except instead of adding the class, we're going to remove it. Okay? All right, so show me the input selector. Works all, hits up every single one of the inputs. Let's clear them. Gets rid of them. Pretty awesome. All right. So that's the input selector. Now, it's preferable, honestly, to use this method. Okay? Just like previously, we had said, well, if I want to pick up all the links on the page, if I wanted to select all the links on the page, I just use A. There's no dot, there's no pound, it's just A. So that tells me I want all the A's on the page. Similarly, if I want all the divs on the page, I would do that. Similarly, if I want all the inputs on the page, I do that. Now say I just wanted the inputs on the page that was type radio. Okay? This is how I would call it. Input type equals radio. So $J input type equals radio. All right? Having said that, let's try it. So we're back here, and we know that it's going to be here. Show me the input type equals type name, and let's go pick it up. $J. Every time I hit radio A, let's do this. Pick up my inputs, which are of type equal radio, and give that a giant nasty orange border. All right, let's try that. Refresh. Here we go. Show me the checkbox selector. Oh, show me the input type name. All right, it doesn't look like it did anything, but if you actually look at the radio button here, it's moving. It's only because of that weird border situation it has on the radio button. So let's just do something a little bit more obvious so that we really make sure that it's working. Let's call it dot radio border, and let's do something else like let's give it a width of 200 pixels so we know it's going to move. All right, and let's call this radio border. Is that what I called it? I'm losing my mind. Here you go. All right, so that should work. Let's try that out. All right, refresh. Hit this. Bam! There it goes. Then clear it. All right. Okay, so next on the list. Now we're really getting there. Now, in addition to these individual type things, if there's a colon input, you better believe there's going to be things like colon checkbox. So let's just check that out. And I've stuck my page here. And colon checkbox. Let's see if that actually works. Click. $J in dot colon checkbox, and we're also going to give this we're going to add class of radio border because we already know that the orange border doesn't work. We're going to give it a radio border, which actually isn't a border. It's more like, you know, giant size. Size it out, and let's see if that works. So show me the checkbox selector. There it goes. So it's awesome. And it actually affected all of these too, because it picked all checkboxes on the page. Just like we talked about earlier, the multi-select is actually functioning and working. Awesome. Now, one of the workhorses of jQuery is the EQ command. The EQ command says, if I have a collection of things, if I have a collection of items, I can pick which one of those collection of items I'm working with. So say you have the UL, the unordered list, and you have a bunch of line items. Okay, this is what's currently on our page right now. And this is variable. I mean, this is the reason why EQ is effective, because this is the number of line items that show up are variable, depending on what query is being used, depending on what query the consumer is looking for, depending on whether or not a new item has been added to the list. I mean, it happens all the time. If you have a new post that goes up, if you tweet a lot and there's a whole bunch of tweets out there, and you tweet every 5 minutes, you know, a new item gets added to this list all the time. So how do we know? Let's pick one. And so whatever comes in, let's say I want the second line item. Excuse me. Let's say I want the second line item. I would say EQ, oh, that's a G. EQ1. And why EQ1? Because JavaScript is a zero-based language. So if I wanted this first one, I would say EQ0. If I wanted the second one, EQ1. If I wanted the third one, EQ2. All right, so let's try this, okay? And, oh, we forgot to do the checked. Tell me the checked boxes. We'll get back to that. Let's just do, hit up the EQ one. So every time I click on that link, then let's do this. Li dot hit me up the second line item, which would be EQ1, and once again we're going to chain it and give me an orange border around it. Let's see if so. Show me the second Li. Bam. There you go. Similarly, if I wanted to, just to make sure that that works here, if I wanted to do, let me just check that that's Li4. Yes, it is. Give me the fourth one. I would say EQ3. So here's a second, here's a fourth. All right, we're going to backtrack a little because this is we're going to talk about the checkboxes again, because this happens all the time. People want to know if I've selected something or not. Okay? So we're going to do this here. There's a really great jQuery method for checked. To check I obviously cannot type and talk today at the same time, but to check which checkboxes are checked. Okay, so when I click on that link, what I wanted to do is, now this is going to be a little complicated, so kind of gloss over the complexity of this function, but we'll get to it later on in the course. But we'll work this out. Just kind of follow along here. So $J, what we want to do is find all the inputs that are checked. So just similarly to this colon checkbox and this colon input, you could do a colon checked, and it will find all the inputs that have been checked. All right? When we find that, for each of them, and this is probably a little bit more complex language than you're used to, but for each of those checked inputs, run this function. Let's alert, and we can do this. If you recall, where this is picking up, if there were 5 boxes on the page and 3 of them were checked, this selector picks the 3 that are checked, and then this method goes through each one of those 3, and then this is designating the individual ones that we're going through. So this, get the value of it and alert and pop it up on the screen. Now since we only have one checkbox, it's only going to happen one time, if it does happen. Alright, so let's try this. Tell me the checkbox Clicked on it, nothing happened. Why? Because nothing's checked. All right, so let's hit the check. Bam! The value of that is something else. Well, let's make sure I put something else in there. Yep, the value of this one checkbox is something else. Let's call it, just to make sure we're not going crazy and it's really doing what it's supposed to do, let's call it checkbox. Let's call the value of that checkbox, checkbox 1. And make sure that it's picked this up. Tell me the checkbox checks this. Nothing happens because I haven't checked it. There you go, checkbox 1. This is really valuable when you're starting to do kind of this dynamic interaction with people when they're sitting there checking their checkboxes. Say, oh, I want to buy these tickets. I don't want to buy these tickets. I don't want to buy those tickets. This way, you know which ones they've picked, and you can put them in your cart and add up the right amount of money. Similarly, once they've added, for example, once they've picked all their things and they've added the button, hit the submit button, we could make sure they enter in, they know they're prompted to go to the next level of checkoutness, which is putting in your credit card number or putting in your name. And we can facilitate that by using a focus method. So let's say that first text box up there that we were using, which was, I think it was this one, right? It was this one, right? Okay. Oh, I missed a thing here. Then we would pound that and we would focus in on it. All right, so let's try that, okay? So just so you know, that's currently the focus of where our cursor is right here. Let's put the focus, bam, showed up. And just in case you didn't see that the first time, because you only see that one little skinny line, there you go. All right. Also, really great little thing is the submit button, is the submit selector. The reason why that is a great thing, let me just check that that button's name is called Submit I. Yep, it is called Submit I. For some reason I had to deviate from the naming convention. There are a lot of reasons why you would want to pick your submit buttons. If you have a behavior where they do something over here and you want it to also submit a form so that you can return some information back from the data, you need to be able to actually select your submit button. So we could do this, submit, and again it's going to be that colon submit, just like we were doing the colon checkbox and the colon input. Here's a colon submit, and let's just make sure it's picking up. Now, of course, you might or might not be adding classes. You probably want to be doing something more effective with your submit button, but just for now, so you can know that it's actually selecting these things. This is what we're kind of keeping it nice and simple here. So show me the submit button. Bam, there it goes. It's actually picking the submit button. All right. Now, once again, we're going to get back to this collection thing here. A UL has a collection of LIs. A table has a collection of TRs. A TR has a collection of TDs. And again, once again, if there's lots of stuff going on in your website, you might not ever know what, how many items there are in your collection. It might not be relevant. You don't always have to have, if we go back to my code here, you'll see that these LIs don't have any sort of name. I can actually get rid of this. I was just doing that experimenting earlier. But they don't actually have any sort of name. These look like they've actually been sent back from the database. So you can't always pick for the class selector. You can't always pick with the ID selector. But you can certainly pick. Say I wanted this one, and I knew that this one was empty, and I always wanted to get that last one. There's a thing called the last child. You can hide a lot of stuff there. You can use it as kind of an auxiliary kind of element. So, what's that button called? Last child A. Going back to my naming convention. Click. Function. And we can do $J, and we're going to pick the last child of the LIs. I think we have to add a UL there too. And let's make sure it's picked by adding an orange border. There you go. It's picked. Similarly, sometimes you have sometimes all you know is that you have a bunch of LIs or you have a bunch of TDs, and we just really need the parent, and we don't know the parent's name. We just know that we need that child's particular parent. So we can go LI. This is actually, on this, the syntax is a little different. It's a method. Okay. Add class. Orange border. Oops. Show me the parent of the LI. There you go. Now, there's also a parents. And what do you think that'll do? It'll give you all the parents above the current element. All right? So, this is going to be a nasty, so shield your eyes a bit. Bam! So, we're here. These are not bordered out, but every single parent above the LIs are showing up. All right. Now, all right, we've gone through EQ, we've gone through focus, we've gone to submit, last parent, parents. Odd. Odd is awesome. Odd is also works on a collection. So an LI or TR or a TD works on collections. Basically, it says every odd item. So not 0, not 2, but every odd item, 1, 3, 5, 7. Do something with it. Pick those. All right? So, say you have a table. Typical e-commerce stuff. You have a table, you have the name, you have the name of the item, you have the price, you have quantity available, all right? Then you have item 2, you have the price 2, you have the quantity 2, and this could just go on forever and ever and ever. And when you have all that data on the page, now I don't know about you, but But I like seeing, like, when it's paginated and you have like different if you do go on Query and say, give me all the books that have the name toy in it, well, it's going to come back with you with 1,000 items, and it breaks it out into like 100 per page or 200 per page. You can choose whatever. I like seeing a lot more than having to sit there and page through them all. But it does make the table more difficult to read because it just looks like a whole bunch of data, printouts of stuff. Great usage for odd, okay? Let's do this. Let's build a table. In our table, every row, every odd row, let's add a class gray background, so that this way your eyes can adjust to it. All right? So let's try that. Do I have a table on here? I can't recall. Oh, yes, I do have a table down here. All right. Oh, that's where the check 1s and check 2s are. So here you see here, check 1, check 2, check 2. That's actually a table. So this is a 1 TD, and that's another TD. All right? And the reason why that gray background is not showing up on the table is because we haven't built the class. So let's go and build a class. Oops, sorry. .graybg. We're going to give it a background color of £DDD. I like to use that one. It's very, it's not very obtrusive. So let's try that. And look at that. It colored my backgrounds for me. And this way it gets, when you have all that data on the information, it makes it easier to read. All right. Finally, oh, we could show the odd LIs. You get the point of LI of odd, right? Finally, we can do something like this. This is a little bit more funner. TR. When I click on a TR, now if you notice over here, I have checkbox ID, checkbox ID, checkbox ID. That's considered, these are attributes of this TR. Okay? So what I want to do is give me the CBID, checkbox ID, of this thing that I just clicked on. So when I click on any one of those rows, give me the CBID of the row that I just clicked on. And let's pop it to the screen. Oh, and we can also use our checked. We can also use our checked element. $CB plus ID. Actually, let's just check on it. Anywhere on that row, let's do that. That'll be better. All right, so whenever I click on anywhere in that row, it doesn't have to be on the checkbox itself. I can just click anywhere in that row. I'm going to check it. And it's going to be this checked attribute. And it's going to be set to true. Okay? here we go. I can certainly click that. But what's more important is if I click here, it'll check it. I didn't toggle it. I really should be toggling it, but well, that gives you a giant overview of how to select stuff in jQuery. We went through a whole bunch of stuff. There are lots more selectors. Again, don't forget the most generics, which is just the A or just the div. And don't forget this, which is used on a lot of stuff. You saw me use it a couple times here. And then you saw a real example of selector usage with the checkboxes at the end. So hopefully this gives you has gotten your feet wet. There's more selectors you can use. You can look it up on jQuery.com, all the different types of selection that you can use. Experiment with lots of different stuff. I don't go through every single command that you can use. I don't go through every single method or every single property. I just give you a basic overview of the ones that I particularly like to use. I end up using a lot when I'm programming out there on a site. Also it fits my coding style. Just because I use it a lot doesn't mean you need to use it a lot. Just because you use it a lot doesn't mean I won't use it a lot. You know, it doesn't matter. It's really dependent on preference and coding style. So go out there, explore, experiment, take an adventure. All right, thanks for watching us.